You know that tiny, hollowing moment when a life you've been living for years, the patient, invisible one, suddenly finds a headline that erases it. That was my graduation day. Dresses, diplomas, tassels, and a phone buzzing with a post that felt like a slap. My sister in front of an airport gate, dressed like a postcard. My parents in the background with matching smiles and balloons. Proof that they'd chosen her story to celebrate. Underneath, my mother had commented, "She's the only one who makes us proud." The words sat on the screen like a verdict. I clicked the image larger and watched the light from the phone paint my fingers. People congratulated them, friends called, strangers left heart emojis. I remember the way that small, impossible phrase, "the only one," folded my chest inward and then, oddly, flattened into something else, a clear, cold acceptance. I was not surprised. I was simply done pretending I was. I walked out of the campus auditorium with my diploma folded under my arm like proof that I had survived something. Not that I had been loved for it. Later that night, while my roommates celebrated and the apartment smelled like cheap champagne and burnt pizza, I logged into a financial landscape. My family thought I didn't know how to read. There it was, the family fund. They talked about in jokes at dinner, the account my father referenced as the nest egg for the whole family, while handing my sister another credit card like a prop. The balance flashed in cold numerals, a number I'd seen on pay stubs and on my rent invoices, the same number that had funded holidays and plastic smiles. I didn't act immediately. I stared. I made myself a cup of tea and let the steam fog the kitchen window. And in that fog I felt the first tiny joy of being awake to everything for once. You're watching her retaliation. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Because sometimes the quietest people learn to move unseen, and silence can be the most precise instrument in a hands-on world. They'd asked me to help, with Claire's wedding months before casual family language that always meant labor and money for me, and applause and attention for her. Help turned into paying venue deposits in my name because their accounts are tied up for business. The dress boutique invoiced to me because we'll sort it later. The photographer who only accepted a corporate check my name on the paperwork. I told myself it was generosity. I told myself that family is messy and that paying could be the thing to fix years of polite neglect. But I kept receipts. Habit is a strange thing. When you grow up overlooked, you become meticulous. The bills accumulated. My shifts doubled. My nights shortened. They never noticed or pretended not to. So when the guard at the marble steps of the reception hall, a small, square man with a headset and a laminated guest list, closed the gate to my children and said, "Sorry, ma'am." No children allowed. I felt a simple, fierce clarity. My daughter Lily clutched the paper flower she'd made for her aunt. My son Jamie hugged a small toy car he'd taken from home because he wanted to give it as a present. They were shaking. The guard's eyes flicked to their faces, to me, to the designer clutch on my sister's arm, and then away, as if he had been trained to look only at certain faces and not at the everyday ones. My heart did something strange and quiet. It measured the distance between who I existed for them to be and who I actually was. I turned around with my children and walked down the hall the way you walk when you are carrying more than a backpack, carrying dignity folded and tight. People watched us leave, relatives with napkins that had once wiped cake from Claire's chin, friends who had posed in the same photos that would later be captioned #blessed. Claire's smile was bright and cold when she saw us. "You didn't have to come," she said, half sweet, half triumph. I hear that line now and know how many variations it has in the mouths of people who feel entitled. "You didn't have to come. You shouldn't have come. You were never invited." I answered calmly because fury was not a good look in a place that thrived on appearances. Of course I did. "It's family," I said, and my voice sounded like a story someone tells about other people, not themselves. We left under a sky that tried to muster sympathy and failed. I buckled Lily into the car, watched her small hands curl around the paper flowers, and felt something right and terrible align. I had paid for that chandlery and the silk napkins and the string quartet, and in return was told my children didn't belong. It was elegant and obscene in equal measure. That evening, as music and laughter receded behind the building, my phone buzzed with a call from a number I barely knew. "Henry Fenton, the patriarch of the groom's family, a man polished to a hardness," he said without warmth. "The wedding is off." He sounded like someone reading a press release. "They are on their way to your house to beg," he said. "Do not answer the door." I could hear in the background the rustle of silk, Claire's voice pleading no, demanding, and then a cold silence that said everything. When the knock came at my door, loud and insistent, the house filled with the clatter of desperation. I did not open. I watched their shadows move across the curtains, the silhouette of a hand raised and slammed against the wood. I could have opened and let the theater begin. Their inflated apologies, the melodrama, the excuses staged as humility. I could have let Claire stand there and explain away years of cruelty with a watery "I'm sorry." Instead, I sat on the couch with a cup of coffee cooling in my hands and smiled with the kind of serenity that comes from being the architect of the moment rather than subject to it. Because they didn't know the whole timeline. They didn't know I'd waited for this moment. They didn't know the contracts and vendor agreements were in my name, that contracts contained payment clauses and immediate cancellation penalties. They didn't know I had spoken to Henry's assistant 2 weeks earlier and quietly set a contingency. One breach of decorum, or one unapproved exclusion, and every booked service would receive a formal notice. They didn't know I'd instructed the caterer that the deposit was contingent on inclusive guest lists. They didn't know I'd set up the lighting company's invoice to draw from an escrow account that I controlled. They didn't know that my silence had been patient because I had been building a mechanism that would hum quietly to life the moment they revealed where they stood publicly. The next morning, the world narrowed to headlines. Fenton. Quinn wedding collapses, family feud causes chaos. Social feeds filled with the kind of shocked, performative concern that will always be a marketplace for sympathy. My stepmother's friends commented in bursts of shocked emoji and faux condolence. The Fentons issued a statement, terse and solemn, carefully omitting certain names and responsibilities. Everyone asked, who canceled. The answer circled back to me like a calm bird. There are different kinds of vengeance, and mine was financial and structural. I had not intended to ruin them, at least not in the petty, shouty ways people imagine revenge to be, but I had intended to make the cost of their cruelty visible and unequivocal. I wanted the invoices to stand like a mirror. Look at your expenses, look at your priorities, see what you value in the ledger. That week I watched the fallout with the clinical detachment of someone who knows how money changes hands and what it says about character. Vendors called me, the legal department called, and a few journalists reached out with the right kind of questions. I answered nothing at first. The silence was a tool and a message. You are used to being able to buy narrative, to spin charity into content. You cannot buy accountability. As they scrambled to save face, I did what quiet people do when they decide to take control. I audited. I pulled up account histories, traced wire transfers, opened ledgers they thought buried, and laid them out like evidence in a trail. There were so many small things: the consulting fee that paid for a villa renovation, the charitable donation that looped back into a company headed by a friend, the gap where a sponsorship payment should have been, that instead padded a personal account. It was not dirty money in the sensationalist way tabloids like. It was tidy, legal-looking transactions with signatures and rubber stamps. The brilliance of it was that the transactions were credible until you followed them through. I followed each thread. I pulled one corner and watched the fabric come unstitched. When you have been invisible your whole life, you learn to see what everyone else calls background. That night, when I finally began to move money small at first, a test, the kind of transfer you make to a savings you call future rent, it felt almost ceremonial. Not theft, reallocation. A quiet rectification of imbalance. People assume that dramatic moments require dramatic gestures. They don't. Money is patient, and systems are mechanical and human in equal measure. I created a pattern of transfers that read like a harmless shuffle. Pay the caterer 10% now, the florist 20% on completion. Put an escrow on the hall booking pending guest list confirmation. Each entry was justified by an email I had in my archives or a call log I had from months earlier. For every move I made, I had a paper trail that could stand up to a forensic accountant's scrutiny, because I was not forging. I was exercising permissions they had signed off on through laziness or trust. By the end of the month, there were bounced transfers, disappointed vendors, and the first private messages from people I had never expected to call. Are you moving? This is getting ugly. I replied with a calm that annoyed them. I'm rearranging priorities. I arranged them not to punish but to reveal. I wanted them to watch their life, the careful, curated American suburban life, fold into a series of invoices and decisions they could no longer spin into virtue. And even as the fire quietly fed itself, there were moments I did not anticipate. My son's small voice asking if Aunt Claire was sad. My mother's voice on the phone, sharp and then fawning when discussing the neighbor's sympathy. Those threads of human drama are messy. They make the victory taste complicated. I never wanted my children to feel abandoned or to hold a grudge as long as I had, so I shielded them from the direct violence of my moves. I told them stories of how grown-ups sometimes forget the right things until someone reminds them. I bought Jamie an ice cream on a Wednesday and let Lily pick a new book. things that made me feel like a person again, not a plot device. And while they slept each night, the quiet hum of the city outside was a lullaby for the small things I was saving. Their tuition, a deposit for a house that would truly be ours without the weight of someone else's patronage. Revenge in the architecture I had designed it was not the end. It was a bridge from non-existence to choice. When the first legal letters started arriving at their doorstep, when the concierge returned a call to tell me that the caterer had been paid in full, except the 2 outstanding invoices that Claire had personally requested as extras, I watched their faces through the window of a cafe and saw panic press old lines into new wrinkles. They ran to friends who had once been comfortable with their crowd. Some stayed loyal and called with offers. Host new affairs, others started to measure distance. The social network that had propped up the Quinn, Fenton merged like scaffolding, began to creak. I had brute, force and patience on my side. Systems take time to collapse, and patience takes time to prepare. My revenge was not a shout, but unpicking, a long evening of gentle denials and polite, contractual cancellations. It was the slow unmasking of a house that had never held us all in the first place. That night, as I put Lily and Jamie to bed, I thought of their small hands, of their faces lit by the tiny nightlight shaped like the moon. They were safe because I had been cruelly practical when the world was not. I closed their door, walked to the window, and watched the city lights blink like a ledger of stars. I had started with a line on Instagram and ended with a balance sheet that finally read like truth. Revenge isn't always fireworks. Sometimes it's the even, steady unfurling of what has always been true, finally set to paper and given a voice. The first part of the plan had worked. They would come to my door at midnight with tears and pleas, and I would let the silence of their invoices speak louder than anything I could say, but that moment when they actually stood on my porch and begged would be reserved for the very last act, the point at which the ledger is closed and debts are called. For now, I would keep moving money, keep tracing lines, and let patience do its slow work. That night, after the chaos of the ruined wedding, silence became my only companion, the kind of silence that doesn't comfort, it slices. My house was dim, just the amber light from the kitchen reflecting off the glass of untouched wine. I sat there, motionless, listening to the faint hum of the city outside. It was strange how quiet life felt once you stopped explaining yourself to people who only wanted to misunderstand you. Claire's voice still echoed in my head, sharp and entitled, "You're overreacting, Alara." It was just a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding, the same woman who banned my kids from walking into the wedding I paid for now wanted mercy. I stared at my reflection in the window, and for the first time I didn't see the tired sister anymore. I saw someone else, someone who had finally remembered what power felt like. Phone didn't stop ringing. Claire, Vanessa, even distant relatives who had ignored me for years all suddenly remembered my number. I didn't pick up, let them panic, let them wonder what I'd do next. The funny part was, they thought I had already played my final card. They thought ruining wedding was my revenge, but that was just the introduction. I hadn't even started yet. The next morning I woke up before dawn. The air outside was damp with rain, the streets quiet. I brewed coffee, opened my laptop, and started pulling up the contracts, every single invoice, receipt, and agreement tied to the wedding. My name was everywhere, and in business, paper is louder than blood. By 9 a.m., my inbox was full of frantic emails from vendors, decorators, photographers, caterers. They all wanted to know who would cover the losses. I replied to every one of them, calm and professional. Please redirect all claims to Vanessa Quinn. The stepmother of the bride was the decision maker. Here is her contact information. Then I sat back and let the dominoes fall. Within hours, Vanessa's phone must have exploded. Calls, demands, payment notices all piling up like the years of disrespect they'd handed me. Around noon, my phone finally buzzed again. Not with an apology, not with regret, but with fury. "You think this is funny?" Vanessa hissed the moment I picked up. Her voice was sharp, trembling between rage and desperation. "I think it's fair," I said evenly. "I funded your daughter's dream wedding. You funded your own humiliation." She went silent. I could almost hear her breathing through gritted teeth. "You're destroying this family." I smiled faintly, even though she couldn't see me. "No, Vanessa. You did that when you turned family into a transaction." I hung up before she could respond. It felt clean. That evening, I drove to the place where my father used to take me fishing, a quiet lake outside town. I hadn't been there in years. I sat on the old dock, the wood creaking beneath me, and let the cool wind hit my face. For a while, I thought about the past, how my father always told me, "Never fight them in their world, Alara. Build your own. Then they'll come crawling to you." And that's exactly what I plan to do. Over the next few weeks, I turned every ounce of pain into precision. I began liquidating old assets, reclaiming the properties my father had left behind, the ones Vanessa conveniently forgot to mention in probate. Every document I dug up was like a weapon being polished. She'd built her little empire on the foundation of his name. I was about to pull the ground out from under her. Meanwhile, Claire was falling apart publicly. Social media was merciless. The Fenton family had withdrawn their partnership and released a formal statement distancing themselves from the Quinns. Rumors spread that the wedding collapse was due to financial deception. Claire's carefully curated image, the perfect daughter, the elegant bride, was shredded in a week, but I wasn't done. There was one thing still left. Inheritance, my father's old construction firm, Rowan and Steele, which Vanessa had claimed was bankrupt, except it wasn't. I found hidden contracts, unpaid invoices, and a dormant account with over $200,000 money that should have gone to his heirs. That meant me. So I revived the company quietly, rebranded it under a new name, Rowan Restoration. And on the first Monday of the new year, Vanessa received a letter, an official legal notice stating that all assets under her control were now under review by the estate's true heir. Me. She showed up at my office that afternoon, no makeup, no pride left, just fear. "You can't do this," she whispered, gripping the edge of my desk. "This will ruin us." I looked up slowly from the papers. "Then maybe you shouldn't have started with me." Her lips trembled. "You're heartless." I leaned forward, meeting her eyes. "No, Vanessa, I just finally learned it from you." She left without another word. That night, I got a message from Claire. It wasn't angry. It wasn't defensive. It was small. "I don't know how to fix this. Please." "I've lost everything." I stared at it for a long time. Once upon a time, I might have replied, but I didn't owe her peace anymore. I owed it to myself. Instead, I turned off my phone, poured myself a glass of wine, and walked out into the balcony. The city lights glowed like stars beneath me. Lily and Jamie were asleep upstairs, safe, loved, untouched by all the poison I'd escaped. I smiled softly. Revenge wasn't loud, it was quiet. It was watching them unravel under the weight of their own cruelty. It was peace, and as I stood there, feeling the cold night air, I realized something profound. I hadn't just taken back what was mine. I'd taken back who I was. That was the moment I knew the game wasn't over yet, because the best revenge stories never end when they expect them to. They end when you walk away smiling, and they're still wondering how you did it. Weeks passed, and the storm that had shattered the Quinn family didn't quiet down. It evolved. Rumors turned into headlines, whispers became public humiliation. Claire's once perfect wedding was now a symbol of betrayal, and Vanessa had become the face of financial scandal. I watched from a distance, not with glee, but with the stillness of someone who had seen enough to never need validation again. Then, one afternoon, while reviewing contracts in my office, a letter arrived. It wasn't digital, it was handwritten. The paper was ivory, the handwriting elegant. I recognized it instantly. "Claire, Alara, I need to see you, not to fight, just to talk. Please." I sat there for a long moment, the letter trembling slightly between my fingers. I didn't owe her anything, but something in me, perhaps the last fragment of the sister I once was, whispered, "Finish this, face to face." That evening, I drove to the old garden cafe where we used to go as kids. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and rain. Claire was already there, sitting by the window, her hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. Her eyes were swollen, mascara faintly smeared. For the first time, she didn't look like the polished, untouchable sister who'd looked down on me all her life. She looked human, Alara. She began softly, her voice fragile. "Claire," I said, sliding into the seat opposite her, "I didn't expect to hear from you." "I know," she said, "and I wouldn't have, but I need to tell you something before you hate me forever." I leaned back, folding my arms. "Go ahead." She took a deep breath. "I didn't know Mom, Vanessa, was going to do that at the wedding. She told me your kids weren't feeling well. I only found out when when Mark told me what happened." "Interesting," I said flatly. "You mean to tell me you didn't notice your own nephew's photos plastered on the entrance wall under the words, 'Do not admit'?" Tears pooled in her eyes. "I saw it too late, Alara, and when I confronted her, she said it was to keep things classy." I froze. I should have said something. I should have stopped her. "You didn't," I said coldly. "You let it happen. Just like you let everything else happen." She bit her lip. "You're right, but I'm paying for it now. We lost everything, the money, the house, even the respect. Dad's furious, Vanessa's. She's gone, gone." I raised an eyebrow. "She left last week, took what she could and vanished. No one knows where she is." For a moment, silence, then I said, "Good. Maybe she finally learned what it feels like to start from nothing." Claire stared at me, her eyes pleading. Alara, I'm not asking you to forgive us. I don't know how to live with this guilt. I looked at her carefully. Beneath the wreckage of her pride, I saw the scared little girl who used to follow me around the garden, asking me to braid her hair. And though part of me wanted to reach out, the other part, the stronger one, remembered every humiliation, every insult, every door slammed in my face. I don't hate you, Claire, I said finally, but I don't pity you either. What you're feeling, that emptiness, that silence, that's called consequence. Live with it. She lowered her gaze, tears spilling down. You've changed. I smiled faintly. No. I just stopped letting people like you decide who I am. I stood up to leave, but before I could walk away, she grabbed my hand. Alara, please at least tell me. Why didn't you answer the door that night? Dad said everyone came to beg you to forgive us. I turned slowly, because, Claire, I didn't need to hear apologies from people who were only sorry after losing something. You can't beg your way out of karma. Her hand slipped from mine as I walked out. Outside, the rain had started again, soft and cold against my skin. It washed away the last traces of bitterness clinging to me. For the first time in years, I felt light, not because I'd won, but because I'd let go. That night, as I tucked Lily and Jamie into bed, I looked at their sleeping faces and whispered, "You'll never have to fight for love the way I did." Then I went to my office one last time. On my desk sat a sealed folder, the final set of documents transferring full control of Rowan Restoration. To me, I signed it with steady hands, then poured myself a glass of wine. My phone buzzed a message from an unknown number. You don't know me, but I'm contacting you about Vanessa Quinn. She tried to access a dormant account under your late father's name. I thought you should know. I stared at the message for a long time, then smiled. Maybe some people never learn. I closed the phone, leaned back in my chair, and whispered into the quiet room, "Game on."